Dear chosen one, when God removes his chosen, the world rarely notices until it's too late. Silence after a storm can be deceiving. It's not always the calm of relief. Sometimes, it's the eerie stillness before judgment falls. Have you ever sensed that your presence was shielding others from consequences they didn't even realize were coming? That the moment you step away, things unravel. Throughout history, God's divine assignments have shaped families, communities, and even entire nations. Yet many mistake his protection for luck, his warnings for noise, and his grace for mere coincidence, until suddenly, the chosen are gone. Think about it. When Lot left Sodom, destruction followed, Genesis 19 verse 24. When Jesus walked out of the temple, devastation came years later, Matthew 24 verses 1-2. Even today, how often do people mock God's messengers, only to realize too late that they were right all along? Before we go any further, I want to express my deepest gratitude to those who have supported this message through Super Thanks. Your generosity is not just appreciated, it's making a difference. You are helping to spread this truth to those who need it most. And to every listener, whether you donate or simply receive this message in your spirit, know that your presence here is a blessing. May God multiply back to you in ways beyond what you can imagine. If this resonates with you, if you feel the weight of your journey and the undeniable shift in your spirit, comment 999 below. Let it be your declaration that you recognize the path you are on, that you understand your divine assignment, and that you are ready for what comes next. Because when God decides your mission is over, it's not just a departure, it's a divine event. And trust me, the world will feel the void you leave behind. Now let's talk about why your exit is not an accident, but a sign of what's to come. God's chosen ones, your mission is over, and now you're leaving. God has decided. Number 1, you were never here for comfort. You were here for collision. Have you ever wondered why your presence makes people uncomfortable? Why doors that seem wide open for others suddenly shut in your face? Why you face resistance, opposition, and rejection, even when all you do is stand in truth? It's because you were never sent here for comfort. You were sent here for collision. God's chosen ones are never given the luxury of an easy, peaceful existence. You weren't designed to blend in or be embraced by the masses. You carry something that disrupts the world around you, even without speaking. Your presence alone challenges the status quo. Do you notice how people shift when you enter into the room? How they become uneasy, defensive, or even hostile? It's not about your personality or your words. It's about the light you carry. Darkness cannot stand in the presence of light without being exposed. This has always been the case for God's chosen ones. Do you remember Moses? He was raised in Pharaoh's palace, yet he was never truly accepted. His very existence was a contradiction, an Israelite living among Egyptians, a man called by God yet raised among oppressors. Was it a coincidence that his destiny led him to break an entire system of bondage? Exodus 3 verse 10. What about Elijah? He stood against an entire corrupt religious order, 450 prophets of Baal, calling fire from heaven and proving that God alone is sovereign, 1 Kings 18 verses 36-38. Can you imagine the level of resistance he faced? The isolation? Do you ever feel like you stand alone too? And then there is Jesus himself. The Son of God walked among men, healing the sick, raising the dead, and preaching truth. Yet the very people he came to save crucified him. Why? Because truth is not always welcomed. Have you ever felt that rejection? Like the more you walk in purpose, the more you lose people. That's because you weren't here to make people feel comfortable in their dysfunction. You were here to expose it. You were never called to be accepted. You were called to be a reminder that darkness has an expiration date. But here's the truth most people overlook: your time is limited. Do you ever feel like you're being pulled away from certain places, certain people, certain situations? It's because you were never meant to stay. When your mission is complete, God removes you, not as an afterthought, but as a divine strategy. Think about Lot. He lived in Sodom, a righteous man surrounded by corruption. God didn't just invite him to leave. He pulled him out. And the moment he was gone, judgment fell upon the city, Genesis 19 verses 15 to 26. What would have happened if he stayed? Would he have perished with them? The same applies to you. When you leave, some will recognize your absence too late. They will realize that the very thing they resisted was the only thing keeping destruction at bay. Others will continue in their blindness, unaware that your departure was a sign, a final warning before consequences come. So now ask yourself, what happens when you leave? Will they wake up, or will they face the judgment they never saw coming? Your removal isn't a retreat. It's a statement. Are you ready to walk away when God says it's time? Number 2, your exit is a divine strategy, not a retreat. Have you ever felt the undeniable pull to leave, long before you fully understood why? A sudden shift. A sense of disconnection. Doors that once opened with ease now closing. People who once welcomed you now turning cold. That's not random. That's not failure. That's divine strategy. God's chosen ones are not meant to stay in one place forever. You were never assigned to carry the weight of everything indefinitely. The misconception is that if something is good, if something is impactful, if something is changing lives, then you must stay and sustain it. But what if God's plan was never about you staying? What if your presence was only meant to be a catalyst, not the foundation when God removes you? It's not a retreat. It's a shift in His divine plan. You have already done what you were sent to do. Throughout history, God's chosen ones were never meant to linger indefinitely. You weren't sent to fix everything. You were sent to shift the atmosphere. And once that shift happens, staying any longer becomes counterproductive to your calling. Look at Abraham. He was called out of his homeland, away from his family, away from everything familiar. Not because he failed where he was, but because he had already fulfilled his purpose there. If he had refused to leave, would he have ever become the father of many nations? Genesis 12 verses 1 to 4. Think about Paul. He never planted himself in one city for too long. He went where the Spirit led him, shaking religious systems, confronting corruption, and building up new believers. But when his time in a place was up, he didn't resist. He moved. What would have happened if Paul had insisted on staying in one city out of comfort rather than obeying the call to go? Now look at yourself. Are you holding on to something that God has already told you to release? Are you fighting to stay in a place that has already served its purpose in your journey? Your presence was never meant to be the solution. It was meant to be the warning. The moment you entered, things began shifting. People who had been spiritually asleep started feeling uneasy. Dysfunction that had been tolerated for years was suddenly exposed. Cycles that had gone unchallenged for generations began to crack. But your role was never to fix it all. Your role was to announce that change was coming. People will misunderstand your departure. They assume that if you leave, it means you weren't strong enough to stay. That you lacked the endurance. That you abandoned them. They don't realize that your very presence was an act of grace, a shield, a divine disruption to delay what was inevitable. Think about Noah. He preached for years, warning the people that judgment was coming. Did they listen? No. They laughed, they mocked, they assumed they had time. But the moment Noah entered the ark, the rain began to fall. The time for warning was over, Genesis 7 verses 1 to 16. It's the same pattern over and over again. When the chosen ones are present, there is a window of grace, a chance to repent, a chance to change, a chance to prepare. But when God removes His chosen, it is never without reason. It is a sign that grace is shifting, and the consequences of what was ignored, dismissed, or fought against are about to manifest. Do you see the pattern in your own life? How many people failed to recognize your value while you were still there? How many situations became worse the moment you left? How many times did you try to hold things together, only to realize you were never meant to carry that burden? This is why you must discern when your time is up. Holding on too long can place you in a battle that is no longer yours to fight. Staying where God has already released you from can cost you more than you realize. The mistake people make is thinking that when you leave, things will remain the same. They won't. Your absence is not passive. It is a sign, a prophetic declaration that the season has changed, that the hedge of protection is being lifted, that those who ignored the warning will now face the full weight of their choices. This is why your removal is not just about you. It's about what comes next. Look at the Israelites in Egypt. As long as Joseph was alive, Egypt was blessed. His presence in Pharaoh's court ensured prosperity and protection. But the moment Joseph was gone, a new Pharaoh arose, and the Israelites were enslaved, Exodus 1 verses 8 to 14. His absence marked a turning point in history. When Lot left Sodom, judgment fell, Genesis 19 verses 15 to 25. When Moses left Egypt, the plagues followed, Exodus 10 verses 28 to 29, 12:29-30. When Jesus left the earth, the Holy Spirit was released and the world entered a new era, John 16 verse 7. So what happens when you leave? Will they realize too late that your presence was a covering? Will they finally understand that what they resisted was the very thing protecting them? Will they wake up, or will they face the consequences they never saw coming? Because when God removes His chosen, He's not just moving people. He's moving history. So the real question is, when the time comes, will you have the courage to walk away? Number 3, your presence was an answer to a crisis that no longer needs you. Nothing about your journey has been accidental. Have you ever wondered why you were placed in certain situations, in people's lives, or even in environments that didn't always appreciate you? It wasn't by chance. You were sent. Whether it was a family, a workplace, a community, or even just one person, you were assigned as an answer to a crisis that no one else could solve. But what most people fail to understand is that your presence was never meant to be permanent. God's chosen ones are strategically positioned. Do you ever feel like your presence alone forces people to confront things they'd rather ignore? That's because you weren't just there to exist. You were there to shift, to expose, to awaken. You weren't sent to simply watch things unfold. You were placed in the middle of spiritual, emotional, and even generational battles that had been lingering long before you arrived. But what happens when your assignment is complete? This pattern is seen throughout Scripture. Jeremiah was called to warn Israel about their impending destruction. But once his mission was fulfilled, the judgment still came. But you, dress yourself for work. Arise and say to them everything that I command you. Do not be dismayed by them, lest I dismay you before them. Jeremiah 1 verse 17. His presence was a divine warning. But when the people refused to listen, his role ended, and consequences followed. Have you ever warned someone about a danger they refused to acknowledge, only for them to realize too late that you were right? People rarely recognize the purpose of a chosen one's presence until they are gone. They assume you will always be there, always praying, always interceding, always standing in the gap. Some even take advantage of your wisdom, protection, and spiritual insight without truly valuing it. Have you ever felt unappreciated by those you helped the most? They assume that your presence is a given, something they can ignore or even reject, until one day you are gone. And that's when they finally understand. The peace that surrounded them? Gone. The supernatural favor that followed them? Gone. The covering that kept destruction at bay? Gone. What do you think happens when the divine protection over a place is lifted? History gives us many examples of chosen ones being misunderstood in their time, only to be valued after they were gone. Nikola Tesla, one of the greatest inventors in history, was ignored and ridiculed for his ideas about wireless energy and electricity. Many dismissed his vision, mocked his brilliance, and refused to support his work. But after his death, the world finally realized that he was centuries ahead of his time. How many times have you felt like you were trying to help people who weren't ready to receive what you had to offer? What happens when the ones sent to help are ignored, resisted, or rejected? The answer is simple: the crisis takes over. Look at Joseph in prison. His ability to interpret dreams was a divine gift that could have saved many. But for years, he was forgotten by the very people he helped. Yet the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph but forgot him. Genesis 40 verse 23. It wasn't until Pharaoh himself faced a crisis that Joseph's value was remembered. But by then, the suffering of many had already taken place. Have you ever been forgotten by people who once needed you? What if your absence is the only thing that will make them realize how much you mattered? This is why your departure is not just a moment. It's a shift in divine timing. It is a signal that grace is shifting. That the opportunity to listen, to change, or to repent has passed. What happens next is no longer your concern. Because your role was never to hold everything together. It was to provide an opportunity for transformation. So now ask yourself, who will wake up too late after your absence? Who will realize only in hindsight that your presence was the reason destruction hadn't come sooner? Who will finally understand that their resistance to you was actually resistance to the warning God sent through you? Because when the chosen ones leave, it is not just an exit. It is the beginning of what comes next. Are you ready to walk away when God says it's time? Number 4, you weren't sent to be loved. You were sent to be a warning. Have you ever wondered why people reject you, misunderstand you, or even despise you, no matter how pure your intentions are? Why your presence alone seems to unsettle those around you? It's because you weren't sent to be loved. You were sent to be a warning. People love the idea of being chosen by God until they realize what it actually means. It doesn't mean admiration, applause, or acceptance. It means walking into places where you are not wanted, carrying a truth that makes people uncomfortable, and refusing to stay silent even when they turn against you. You weren't sent to make people feel good. You were sent to wake them up, to disrupt illusions, to confront deception, to deliver a message that few will receive. And that's why you face resistance. You are not being rejected because of who you are. You are being rejected because of what you carry. The truth you speak is a threat. The light within you exposes the darkness in others. And the world has always fought against those who refuse to conform. Do you feel like no matter what you do, people always find a reason to criticize you? That's not by accident. Your presence alone disturbs what they wish to keep hidden. Look at Jeremiah. He was called by God to warn his people. Yet instead of being honored, he was mocked, imprisoned, and even thrown into a cistern to die. Jeremiah 38 verse 6. Do you feel like you're being punished simply for telling the truth? That's because the world doesn't want truth. It wants comfort. Look at John the Baptist. He stood boldly, calling out corruption and preaching repentance. And what was his reward? Beheading. Not because he was wrong, but because the truth he carried made people uncomfortable. Matthew 14 verses 3 to 11. How many people in your life have turned against you, not because you wronged them, but because you refused to tolerate their deception? Even Jesus himself, the greatest of all, was not embraced. He was betrayed, falsely accused, and crucified by the very people he came to save. If they hated him, why would they love you? If the world hates you, keep in mind that it hated me first. John 15 verse 18. So why are you still expecting to be accepted? Your presence alone is a message. It is a declaration that God is watching, that the lies people have built their lives upon will not stand forever. And that is why they resist you. They would rather reject you than face the truth you bring. But this is where many chosen ones struggle. You weren't sent to comfort people in their illusions. You were sent to tear them down, to expose lies, to shake up systems, to remind the world that they have a choice, to change or to face the consequences. But here's the reality: people love darkness more than light. They don't want to be awakened. They want to be left alone. They want to continue living in their deception without interference. Have you noticed how people will fight harder to defend a lie than they will to seek the truth? That's because truth demands change, and change is uncomfortable. So when you step in carrying divine truth, resistance is inevitable. It is not personal. It is prophetic. From the beginning of time, the world has tried to silence the messengers of truth. They mock, dismiss, and even attempt to destroy those who refuse to conform. Do you see this happening in your own life? Have people tried to make you doubt yourself, belittle your calling, or push you away simply because you refuse to be silent? Look at Galileo Galilei, a brilliant scientist in the 1600s who dared to say the earth revolved around the sun. He was condemned as a heretic, forced to recant, and placed under house arrest. But decades later, the world realized he was right. How many people have resisted you, only to later admit you were telling the truth? It has always been this way. People don't want to hear the warning. They want to kill the messenger. If you find yourself misunderstood, rejected, or even hated, don't be surprised. That is the cost of being chosen. You weren't sent to win hearts. You weren't sent to be accepted. You were sent to warn them. Whether they listen or not, that's their choice. But your mission was never about being loved. It was about making sure they had no excuse when the time came. Number 5, the world was never going to change the way you hoped. Have you ever looked at someone and thought, if they could just see the truth, everything would change? Have you ever poured your heart, your time, and your prayers into people, hoping they would finally wake up, only to watch them choose the very path that is destroying them? That's the painful reality every chosen one must face. Not everyone will change, no matter how much truth they receive, no matter how many chances they are given. Some people will remain exactly where they are, not because they don't understand, but because they don't want to. You can warn them. You can pray for them. You can give them every tool they need to break free. But at the end of the day, some hearts are set in stone. Some people aren't just asleep, they are actively resisting the truth because it threatens their comfort, their power, or their illusions. Have you ever tried to pull someone out of deception, only to realize they were fighting to stay there? This is why your mission was never about fixing the world. It was about giving the world a chance. Look at Moses. He led an entire nation out of slavery, performed miracles before their very eyes, and yet how did they respond? They complained. They doubted. They longed to go back to the very chains God had freed them from. No matter how much God revealed himself, many of them refused to change. In spite of all this, they still sinned. Despite his wonders, they did not believe. Psalm 78 verse 32. Does this sound familiar? Have you ever watched someone walk back into their own destruction, even after being shown a way out? Look at Jesus. He healed the sick, gave sight to the blind, cast out demons, and preached the kingdom of God. And yet, many still rejected him. Even after witnessing his power, they cried out for his crucifixion. Luke 23 verse 21. If the Son of God himself could not convince everyone, why do you think you can? This is why you must let go of the weight of trying to change people. It was never your job to transform them. Only God can do that. Your role was never to save the world. Your role was to give the world an opportunity to be saved. Every word you spoke, every warning you gave, every moment you spent trying to wake people up, it wasn't for your own satisfaction. It was so that when everything they ignored finally collapses, they won't be able to say, "I didn't know." Look at Joan of Arc, a young woman who was given divine visions to lead France to victory. She believed. She fought. She fulfilled her calling. But in the end, she was betrayed and burned at the stake. Did her death mean her mission failed? No. History proved her right. But by then, it was too late for those who condemned her. How many people will only understand your value once you're no longer there? This is why you must not hold on to disappointment. You were never sent to force change. You were sent to give them the choice. Some will listen. Some won't. But either way, you did what you were sent to do. So don't carry the weight of their decisions. Don't lose yourself trying to save those who don't want to be saved. You were never sent to change the world the way you hoped. You were sent to make sure it had no excuse when judgment came. Will you let go of what's not yours to carry? Or will you keep trying to hold on to people who were never willing to change? Number 6, your suffering was not for you. It was a message in flesh. Have you ever asked, why me? Why the betrayal? Why the rejection? Why the isolation? Why did your journey have to be so painful? The truth is, your suffering was never just about you. It was a message in flesh. Nothing you endured was random. It wasn't bad luck. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't punishment. It was part of the calling. God didn't just give you a message to speak. He made you the message. Every wound, every loss, every storm you survived wasn't just for you, it was for those who were watching. Your life became a living prophecy. God's chosen ones don't just proclaim the truth. They embody it. Before you could ever warn others about betrayal, you had to experience it yourself. Before you could teach endurance, you had to endure. Before you could speak about rejection, you had to feel it firsthand. Your life was shaped into a testimony before you ever opened your mouth. Have you ever wondered why your pain seemed so public? Why people who never cared about you still watched your downfall? That's because your life wasn't just for you. It was for them. Look at Hosea. God told him to marry a woman who would betray him, not as a punishment, but as a prophetic sign of Israel's unfaithfulness. Hosea 1:1, 2:3. Can you imagine being called to live out your warning, rather than just speak it? Yet through his suffering, Israel was given a mirror of their own sin. What if your suffering was the mirror someone else needed to see their own reflection? Look at Job. He lost everything, his wealth, his health, his family. Not because he was unrighteous, but because God was proving something through his suffering. But he knows the way that I take, when he has tested me, I will come forth as gold. Job 23 verse 10. Have you ever felt like your trials were designed to reveal something greater? That's because your suffering wasn't just a test. It was a testimony in progress. That's why the attacks came. That's why people turned on you. That's why doors closed that should have opened, not because you were wrong, but because your life exposed what others wanted to keep hidden. Have you noticed how people avoid you when you refuse to pretend? How your very existence makes them uncomfortable? That's because you don't just talk about truth. You live it. Look at Harriet Tubman. Born into slavery, she escaped. But she didn't stop there. She went back, over and over, leading others to freedom. She was hunted, threatened, and betrayed, yet she refused to stop. Her suffering wasn't for her alone. It was a message to those still in chains, showing them that freedom was possible. What if everything you went through was meant to show others that survival is possible? Your suffering was the proof. The evidence that what you said wasn't just theory, it was real. And those who watched had a choice, to learn from your pain, or to ignore it until they experience it themselves. Some will wake up because of what you endured. Some will take your story as a warning, changing before they repeat the same mistakes. Others will dismiss it, pretending they never saw what you went through, until life forces them to face the same lessons. Either way, your suffering wasn't wasted. So don't look at your scars as just wounds. They are receipts. Proof that you carried the message. Evidence that they had every chance to pay attention. You weren't sent just to warn people. You were sent to become the warning. And whether they listen or not, your life will stand as undeniable proof that God gave them a chance. Number 7, people don't always recognize what they have until it's gone. Have you ever warned someone, only for them to ignore you until they found themselves in exactly the situation you tried to help them avoid? They hear, but they don't listen. They see, but they don't understand. Then one day, you are no longer there. No more warnings. No more prayers. No more presence holding things together. And that's when reality hits. Your absence is not just a disappearance. It's a divine announcement. The people who dismissed you will start to notice the difference. The peace they took for granted, gone. The protection they never acknowledged, lifted. The wisdom they rolled their eyes at, now suddenly it makes sense. How many times have people rejected your words, only to later experience exactly what you predicted? The very things they once mocked were the things keeping them afloat. And now, for the first time, they are left to deal with the full weight of what they ignored. Do you realize now why God had to remove you? This is how God works. He doesn't always shake people awake through words. Sometimes, He wakes them up through absence. Some will realize too late that they had a rare opportunity, to listen, to change, to appreciate what was given to them. Others will scramble to find someone else to fill the void, thinking they can replace what they lost. But what you carried wasn't just knowledge, kindness, or insight. It was a divine assignment. And assignments can't be replaced by convenience. How many people thought they could replace you, only to find that what you carried can't be imitated? Look at Lot's departure from Sodom. As long as he remained, judgment was delayed. But the moment he left, destruction fell. Did the people of Sodom think they had more time? Did they believe that things would continue as they always had? They didn't realize their opportunity to repent had already passed until fire rained from the sky. Genesis 19 verses 15-2. How many people in your life will only recognize your value after it's too late? Look at Samuel and the Israelites. They demanded a king, rejecting God's guidance through Samuel. But after Saul failed them, they regretted their decision, realizing too late that they had dismissed the one who had been sent to guide them. 1 Samuel 8 verses 6-7, 12:9. Have you ever watched someone reject your help, only to come back in regret when things fell apart? How many people have begged for your presence again after rejecting you first? Your silence now carries more weight than your words ever did. Why? Because now, they aren't just remembering what you said, they are feeling what you carried. Before, they could dismiss your warnings. Now, they face the consequences. Before, they could laugh at your wisdom. Now, they wish they had listened. Before, they could ignore the protection your presence carried. Now, they are left exposed. Do you see how quickly things shift when grace is removed? People always assume they have more time, until they don't. They think they can ignore you without repercussions. They believe they can mock you, resist you, and dismiss you without losing anything. But what happens when what they rejected was the only thing standing between them and disaster? Look at Nikola Tesla, a brilliant scientist who revolutionized modern electricity, yet he was mocked and overlooked during his lifetime. After his death, the world realized how much they had lost. Do you think he was unaware of his own brilliance? Or do you think he knew all along that one day the world would regret how it treated him? The same thing happens with people like you. Some only see the truth when it's too late to fix what they destroyed. Some only appreciate what they had after it's already gone. Your presence was a form of grace, and your absence is proof that grace has limits. How many times has God given people the chance to listen, only for them to waste it? God gives people time to change, but He also gives them consequences when they refuse. The silence you leave behind is a final warning. It is the evidence that they had access to something divine, something rare, and they let it slip away. Some will wake up and repent. Will they be one of the few who learn from their mistakes? Others will try to replace you, thinking they can find another source of what you carried, only to realize it's not something they can find just anywhere. And others will remain blind, trapped in their own choices, and until life forces them to see. Number 8. Your presence in people's lives was never random. It was a test. Have you ever felt like certain people treated you with indifference, disrespect, or even hostility, despite everything you did for them? It wasn't by accident. It was a divine setup, and they were being tested without realizing it. This test was never about you. It was about them, how they treated you, how they responded to you, whether they listened or dismissed you. All of it was being recorded. Some thought they were just dealing with an ordinary person. But in reality, they were interacting with a divine assignment. And like so many before them, they failed. Look at Jesus in his own hometown. Instead of honoring him, they questioned, "Isn't this the carpenter's son?" Matthew 13 verse 55. They refused to believe that someone familiar to them could carry something divine. Because of their unbelief, Jesus did not perform many miracles there. Matthew 13 verses 57 to 58. How many people in your life doubted you, not because you lacked wisdom, but because they couldn't see past their own assumptions? Throughout history, God has sent people as warnings, as opportunities, as second chances. But the pattern is always the same: they are ignored, mistreated, or attacked. Look at Jeremiah. He spent years warning Israel of coming judgment. But instead of listening, they ridiculed him and threw him into a pit to silence him. Yet his words came true, and judgment fell upon those who rejected him. But the Lord is with me like a mighty warrior. So my persecutors will stumble and not prevail. Jeremiah 20 verse 11. Have you ever been treated as an enemy just for telling the truth? Some of the people you encountered had a chance to recognize who you were and align themselves accordingly. But instead, they gossiped about you, doubted you, or even worked against you. They had the opportunity to receive a blessing, but they chose to fail, not because they didn't know better, but because they refused to accept that God had placed something sacred right in front of them. Now the test is over. Their response has sealed their fate. The time they had to treat you correctly, to listen, to take heed, it's gone. How many people thought they had unlimited time to make things right, only to wake up one day and realize the opportunity had already passed? Look at Vincent van Gogh, one of the greatest artists in history. Yet during his lifetime, he was rejected, misunderstood, and dismissed as irrelevant. The very people who ignored his genius are the same ones who later praised his work. But by then, it was too late. How many people in your life will one day regret how they treated you, but their chance to change will already be gone? Look at Nikola Tesla, a scientific pioneer whose inventions shaped the modern world. Yet he was mocked, overlooked, and left in poverty. After his death, the world realized it had ignored one of the greatest minds in history. Doesn't the same thing happen to those who carry something ahead of their time? How many times have you been dismissed, only for people to later realize you were right all along? When God removes his chosen, it's not just about relocation. It's about closing the book on those who refuse to see. The test is graded. The results are in. And now, they will live with what they chose. Look at Luke 10 verse 16, "Whoever listens to you listens to me. Whoever rejects you rejects me. But whoever rejects me rejects him who sent me." Have you considered that when people rejected you, they weren't just rejecting you, they were rejecting God's voice through you? How many people have already failed their test without even realizing they were being tested? Some will reflect and realize they made a mistake. But does realization erase judgment? Others will try to replace you, thinking they can find another source of what you carried. But will they ever truly replace what was divinely assigned? And others will remain blind, trapped in their own choices, until life forces them to see. How many people will only understand what they had when it's far too late? But no matter what happens next, you have done your part. Number 9, the war is bigger than you. Your removal is a tactical move. Your life isn't just about you. Have you ever felt like you were right where you were meant to be, only for everything to suddenly shift? You thought you were making an impact, standing firm, holding the ground you were assigned to. Then without warning, God pulled you out. It felt unexpected, confusing, maybe even painful. But that's because this battle was never just about you. You are a soldier in a much bigger spiritual war, and when God moves you, it's not random, it's strategic. A soldier doesn't ask the general why they are repositioned. They don't question the tactics, the timing, or the orders. They trust that the battlefield is bigger than what they can see. Do you realize that when God shifts you, He is making a tactical move that serves a purpose beyond your immediate understanding? Look at Joseph, sold into slavery, falsely accused, thrown into prison. It looked like his life was spiraling out of control. But what was really happening? God was strategically positioning him. If Joseph had never been removed from his family, he would have never reached Pharaoh's palace. His suffering wasn't just about him, it was about saving an entire nation from famine. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. Genesis 50 verse 20. Have you ever felt like what looked like a setback was actually setting you up for something greater? When God pulls you from one place to another, it's because your assignment has shifted. You may think you're in the right place, doing the right things, holding ground that is important, but God sees the battlefield from above. He knows the entire war strategy, and sometimes that means repositioning His chosen ones. Look at Esther. She was just a Jewish girl in exile until suddenly she was moved into a royal position. At first, she may have wondered why she had been placed there. But when the time came, she understood her assignment. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this? Esther 4 verse 14. What if the place you're being moved to is where you were meant to make the greatest impact? When your role is done, when your presence in a certain place or season is no longer necessary, God moves you so the war can be won in a different way. But this is hard to understand when you're in the middle of it. You might feel like you're being abandoned, sidelined, or even discarded. But what if this isn't rejection, it's redirection? Look at George Washington. Before he became the first president of the United States, he was a military commander. He experienced many losses before he ever saw victory. There were moments when his leadership was questioned, when he had to retreat, when it seemed like he was losing ground. But every movement was strategic. What seemed like a setback was actually a setup for ultimate victory. How many times have you looked at your own journey and thought you were losing, only to later realize that God was positioning you for something greater? God isn't just focused on one battle. He is orchestrating the entire war. And sometimes the best way to win is to move His soldiers in ways that don't make sense in the moment. Trusting God's timing and His strategy requires a level of faith that isn't about seeing the immediate result, it's about believing that His plan goes beyond what you can grasp right now. That's why Abraham had to leave his homeland without knowing exactly where he was going. Hebrews 11 verse 8. That's why the Israelites had to march around Jericho for 7 days before seeing victory. Joshua 6 verses 2 to 5. That's why you must trust that your removal isn't about failure, it's about divine repositioning. When God removes you, it's not because you failed, it's because your position has changed. And now the war moves forward in a way that's bigger than you. Number 10, some people were only protected because of your presence. Have you ever noticed how some people thrived when they were connected to you, but struggled the moment you left? It wasn't luck. It wasn't coincidence. It was divine favor, covering them not because of who they were, but because of who you were. Your presence wasn't just a source of comfort, it was a shield. There are people who lived under the grace attached to your life without even realizing it. They didn't deserve it. They didn't earn it. But because you were there, they reaped the benefits of blessings they didn't sow. How many times have you been the reason someone else's life remained stable, yet they never acknowledged it? Joseph's life is a perfect example. When he lived in Potiphar's house, Potiphar himself was blessed, not because of his own righteousness, but because Joseph was there. The Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. The blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had, both in the house and in the field. Genesis 39 verse 5. How many people thought their success was their own doing, when in reality it was simply the overflow of the favor attached to you? But favor is never permanent for those who don't honor it. What happens when the covering leaves? The blessings disappear. The stability crumbles. And suddenly, the people who took you for granted realize too late that your presence was the reason things didn't fall apart. Look at Sodom and Gomorrah. God allowed the city to continue existing, delaying judgment as long as Lot remained there. But the moment Lot was removed, destruction followed immediately. When Lot had reached Zoar, the Lord rained down burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah. Genesis 19 verses 23 to 24. How many times did God hold back consequences for others simply because you were still in the picture? Some families remained intact because you were the glue holding them together. Some businesses flourished because your integrity and work ethic brought blessings that others benefited from. Some people were protected from harm simply because of the grace surrounding you. But now, the favor they borrowed is gone. The protection they assumed would always be there has been lifted. Nikola Tesla was a man ahead of his time. His work was revolutionary. But during his lifetime, he was unappreciated. Others took credit for his ideas, benefiting from his genius while he was discarded. But after his death, the world realized how much it had lost. How many people thought they could thrive without you, only to realize that what they had wasn't theirs to keep? Some will try to reclaim what they lost, hoping to find the same blessings without you. But the favor wasn't tied to a place, it was tied to the person. That's why when the prophet Elijah left, the famine came. The land remained. The people remained. But the blessing had moved on. How many people assumed they could replace you, only to find that what you carried wasn't something they could manufacture? Even Steve Jobs, after being forced out of Apple, left behind a company that struggled without him. Only after his return did they realize that the vision, the leadership, and the success had been directly tied to his presence. How many people assumed they would be fine without you, only to watch everything fall apart? Now the reality sets in. The peace they never thanked you for is gone. The favor they thought was theirs to keep has disappeared. The stability they assumed was permanent is crumbling. Some will wake up, realizing they failed to appreciate what they had. Others will refuse to acknowledge the truth, blaming circumstances instead of their own blindness. But either way, the covering is gone. Now they will have to face the consequences that were once held back by your presence. Number 11, you were a temporary disruption, not a permanent fixture. Have you ever wondered why you were never able to settle in, why no place ever felt like home for long? It wasn't because something was wrong with you. It was because you were never meant to stay. You were a divine disruption, not a permanent resident. God's chosen ones are not placed to blend in, they are sent as catalysts, designed to unsettle, awaken, and bring movement where there was once stagnation. You weren't sent to build a home. You were sent to set a fire. And fires don't burn forever in the same place. Have you ever felt like your presence in a situation caused everything to shift, but once that shift happened, you were no longer needed? Look at John the Baptist. He was never meant to remain. He wasn't called to be part of the system, he was sent to disrupt it. I am the voice of one calling in the wilderness, make straight the way for the Lord. John 1 verse 23. His role was to prepare, not to stay. And when his time was up, he was removed. Moved. Could it be that your exit wasn't rejection but divine timing? God doesn't send his chosen ones to be comfortable. He sends them to tear down what is built on lies. To shake people awake. To break chains. The divine wrecking ball doesn't settle, it swings, it destroys, and then it moves on. If you had stayed, would your fire have burned out? Would your presence have turned into routine instead of revelation? Look at Harriet Tubman. She didn't free people by staying in one place. She moved. She disrupted. She kept going. She was a force of change, never settling, never slowing down. How many times have you been forced to move, not because you were unwanted, but because your job was already done? Had you remained, the people around you would have grown used to your presence. They would have stopped feeling the urgency. Stopped hearing the call to change. Familiarity dulls the fire. And God's messengers are not meant to become background noise. Could it be that your leaving was necessary for the work to remain? Elijah learned this when he called down fire from heaven. His moment was powerful, but it was never meant to last forever. After his greatest victory, he was led into the wilderness, because his mission in that place had ended. 1 Kings 19 verses 3-4. And have you been trying to stay in a place where God has already declared your mission finished? Your time in that place was always temporary. You were sent to create a shift, to break the cycle, and then to move on. And when you leave, the echo of your disruption remains. Some may resist it. Some may ignore it. But the impact will be undeniable. Do you trust that your absence is just as important as your presence? Number 12, you weren't supposed to see the harvest, only to plant in hard soil. Success doesn't always look the way people expect. Most define success by what they can see, the results, the rewards, the visible impact. But for you, success wasn't about reaping. It was about planting in soil that no one else dared to touch. Have you ever felt like your work was incomplete, like you didn't see the results you expected? That's because you were never called to the easy fields. You were sent to the hard ground, the dry places, the land that others walked away from. Do you realize that your impact wasn't in seeing results, but in breaking through what was once impossible? Look at Moses. He led the Israelites through the wilderness, but he never stepped foot into the promised land. Deuteronomy 34 verses 4-5. Was his journey in vain just because he didn't see the full harvest? No. Because without him, there would have been no journey at all. Could it be that your mission was not to see the reward, but to prepare the way? You were the one cracking open hearts that had been closed for years. You were breaking down barriers, disrupting cycles, planting seeds that others would one day harvest. But the reality is, not all seeds grow immediately. Have you ever considered that the impact of your work may take years to be seen? Look at Van Gogh. He never saw the success of his art during his lifetime. But today, his paintings are priceless. His work wasn't for his own gratification, it was for a generation that came after him. Could it be that your work will be recognized long after you're gone? Your role was never to reap, it was to cultivate, to plant, to prepare. Some seeds take time. Some grow in ways you will never see. But every breakthrough, every transformation, every moment of change that happens later, it started with you. Look at Hudson Taylor, a missionary who dedicated his life to spreading the gospel in China. He faced hardship, rejection, and resistance. But decades after his death, the seeds he planted led to one of the largest Christian movements in history. Could it be that your legacy will be seen in ways you never expected? Are you willing to trust that just because you don't see the harvest, it doesn't mean your work was in vain? Some people are called to reap. But you were called to go where no one else would go. To break what others thought was unbreakable. To plant in the places no one else dared to touch. And one day, when the harvest comes, those who once ignored your efforts will realize it all started with you. Number 13, your leaving marks the beginning of judgment, not the end of your influence. Have you ever felt like your absence made more of an impact than your presence ever did? Like the moment you walked away, things started to shift in a way no one expected? That's because when God removes his chosen, it is never just a quiet departure, it is a prophetic alarm. You weren't just another person passing through. You were the last call. The final warning. The moment God pulls you out of a situation, it isn't the end of your influence, it marks the beginning of judgment. Look at Noah. For years he preached, he warned, he built the ark while the world mocked him. But the moment God shut the door behind him, the rains began to fall. The world didn't realize that Noah's presence was a delay of judgment until it was too late. Then the Lord shut him in. Genesis 7 verse 16. How many people only recognize your value after they can no longer reach you? Your role wasn't just to speak, it was to hold back a wave of consequences. While you were there, you were the shield between judgment and those who needed mercy. You may have felt ignored, disrespected, or unwanted, but your presence was a covering, a delay, a moment of grace. How many people assumed they could reject you without consequence, not realizing they were rejecting their own protection? Now that you're gone, what was held back is free to come. The systems, the people, the places you influenced, they will now have to face the reality of their actions. This isn't about punishment for you. It's about accountability for them. How they treated you. How they dismissed your warnings. How they ignored the truth you carried. It all has consequences. Look at Lot. His presence in Sodom didn't just mean he lived there. It meant judgment was delayed as long as he remained. But the moment he left, destruction followed immediately. Genesis 19 verses 22 to 25. Have you ever wondered how much disaster was held back simply because you were still there? Your leaving is not the end of your story. It is the moment when others must answer for how they responded to what you brought. Those who mocked you will see the truth too late. Those who dismissed you will face the weight of their choices. And for some, the awakening will be unbearable. History has proven this pattern again and again. Look at Joan of Arc. She was called to lead, to fight, to deliver a divine warning. But those around her refused to recognize her calling. They rejected her, imprisoned her, and burned her at the stake. Only to later realize she had been right all along. How many people in your life will only understand what they lost once they are forced to live without it? Look at Edgar Allan Poe, a literary genius who was overlooked, ridiculed, and barely recognized during his lifetime. After his death, the very people who ignored him now consider his work legendary. Why does the world only see the truth once it's too late? How many people dismissed you in life only to wish they had listened once you were gone? When God moves his chosen, the silence that follows isn't peace. It's a prelude to judgment. The real question is, will they realize what they lost before it's too late? Or will they be like those who ignored the prophets, rejected the warnings, and only understood when the consequences could no longer be reversed? Your mission was never about seeking approval, applause, or comfort. It was about obedience. And now that your assignment is complete, the weight of your absence will speak louder than anything you ever said. Beloved chosen one, you were called, you answered, and you did what you were sent to do. There was no need for applause, no longing for approval, because your reward was never tied to earthly recognition. It was always about obedience. About fulfilling your divine assignment, no matter how hard, lonely, or misunderstood the journey became. Now that it's time for you to leave, don't look back. What's done is done. Your assignment is sealed, and nothing can change that. Have you ever wondered if you did enough? If you should have stayed longer? If your work was complete? Let this be your answer: your obedience was enough. The lives you touched, the seeds you planted, the words you spoke, they've all been accounted for. Some will grow in ways you'll never see. Some will only be recognized when the time is right. But every act of faith, every moment of sacrifice, every word of truth, it was all worth it. Your work was never about witnessing the full outcome. It was about serving the greater purpose God had for you. Do you trust that He will take care of the rest? So don't second-guess your journey. You were sent. You obeyed. And now you depart, just as it was written. Your time in this season is finished. The rest is in God's hands. Trust that the impact you made will continue to ripple, whether you see it or not. You have done your part. Now walk away, knowing you fulfilled your purpose exactly as it was meant to be. If this message has touched you, thank you for being here, for listening, and for seeking truth. Your support means everything. If you feel led to give, you can donate through Super Thanks to help continue this work. But whether you donate or not, know that you are deeply appreciated, and your presence here is already a blessing. I pray that wherever you go next, God's light surrounds you, His wisdom guides you, and His favor goes before you. May you walk boldly into your next season knowing that you are chosen, you are loved, and your purpose is not yet complete. Now go in peace. What was meant to be done is done, and what is meant to come next is already waiting for you.